Great. And Cheney, you're going to run the presentation. Awesome. So hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started just in the interest of time. So yeah, thank you for making it to our 18th steering committee meeting. We appreciate the time and commitment you've been giving to this project. So first we'll start off with our Zoom kind of reminders. So if you can turn on, if you're a member of the steering committee, if you can turn your video on, if possible, just kind of keep it more personal, even though we're all online. And whether you're a steering committee member or a member of the public, if you can mute, keep your computers on mute unless you're speaking. If you have any questions about technical issues, you can send a message to Fernando in the chat. We're real excited to have people from the public attending and taking interest in this project. But we wanted to remind everyone that the discussion and the chat, we want to keep those for steering committee members. That just kind of helps us keep on time and keep organized. But we have reserved time at the end of the meeting to answer questions and hear from the public. And you guys probably had a little thing pop up about this, but as a reminder, the meeting's being recorded. So here are our meeting ground rules. So before I kind of read them off, I just wanted to let you guys know, one of our goals moving forward is really trying to do a better job of creating a space where we're hearing more equally from all of the steering committee members. And so you'll notice we have done some changes to our approach for the discussion tonight, but we also need your help for this. So I just wanted to challenge folks tonight. So if you're a person who tends to speak up more frequently, want to challenge you to sometimes pause and create space for others to speak. And if you're someone who tends to be more quiet, want to challenge you to speak up. Because when you speak up, whether it's based on your expertise or your experience or an idea, even just an idea you have, when you share that, it kind of helps us have a more thoughtful conversation. And in turn, that helps us have a more thoughtful plan. So I'll go over these quickly. So allowing room for all, first before seconds, meaning if you've already spoken up, let's wait to speak again before and let everyone else speak. When agreeing, avoid repeating what others have said. The chat function is great for kind of expressing your agreement with something. When disagreeing, be respectful and focus on the idea, not the person. And use the raise hand function or the chat to let us know kind of when you want to speak, and it'll help us kind of keep an eye on that. And again, turning on your video if possible. Into the next slide. So here's our agenda for tonight. So right now we're in our opening for the first 10 minutes, and then we're going to spend the first 45 minutes discussing 3 areas of draft recommendations. So starting with parks and recreation, then moving to food access, and then small business and cultural retail. Then we'll take a break and we'll come back and talk about draft recommendations around preserving and growing primary jobs, and then land use ideas for the Northeast Sunnyside area. And then, as I said before, we're going to end with 10 minutes for public comment and questions.
Great. I'll take it from here for the next couple of slides. Thanks, Grace. So just here's a timeline of the project again. We're at the beginning of 2023, starting to review a lot of the draft plan content with you guys before we go out back into the public with a larger workshop and community outreach. So that will happen again later this summer. Next slide, please. So we used the last month of our steering committee meeting to review the mobility section. And so for this month, we're focused in on quality of life and economy, just kind of honing in on key topics that we think will be most popular with the community members and where we need a little bit more direction, particularly with a lot of the land use ideas in the Northeast Sunnyside. And then the following month, we decided, we could discuss community engagement and outreach strategies for this upcoming phase with you guys, and then followed again by housing and land use. Appreciate everyone's kind of willingness to really jump in and dive in and get into the details with us. Yeah, next slide, please. Great. So I'll go ahead and kind of kick us off with some of the quality of life infrastructure ideas, and then we'll turn it over to Grace to help kind of facilitate the discussion. So the idea is that we'll go by topic, present a broad overview on the recommendations, and then get into discussion there. All right, so this isn't kind of an exhaustive list of all the parks and recreation strategies and policies that are in the draft plan. Again, we'll have a review period for you to review those in detail, but these are some of just the highlights that are also covered in the plan, but also in our draft recommendations map. So some of the key recommendations that are coming out of the draft section is that we've identified opportunity areas for new park space. So these have varied opportunities. So one area that we highlighted is the existing industrial park in Chaffee Park. So working with the property owners there is to improve existing privately owned open spaces by adding more trees and picnic areas for employees in the area. Another opportunity area we've identified is the industrial areas in Sunnyside. So potentially incorporating park space as that area evolves over time. And also potentially as part of the redevelopment of Quick Newton Homes that we're able to have publicly accessible park space in that area as well. And another opportunity is the Diamond Hill property in Jefferson Park that as that goes through redevelopment plans to be able to get additional park space that can serve the residents there. A second key recommendations is just additional park amenities. So these are some things that we've heard from the community about in terms of, what types of improvements would make people use their parks more often. So we've heard a lot about having more tree canopy and shade, places to sit, including picnic areas with grills, improving the playgrounds and having more water-based play features for the neighborhood. Another idea that came up from community is about, doing shared use with local schools. So to be able to use or to work with schools to use school grounds, and as well as also unique areas where parks and DPS share a common boundary, especially at like 47th and Pecos, that's one example. The fourth one is about priority parks for future visioning efforts. So we've heard a lot about specific parks that were just brought up more frequently in community conversations about the need for better programming and amenities. So these range from some larger parks like the 51st and Zuni Park that have opportunities to repurpose existing park space for different uses, but also smaller ones that we've heard about. So again, going back to 47th and Pecos, we've heard that park feels like it's closed off. Some people don't know that it's a public park. So trying to think about ideas to improve that space, make it more welcoming and more active for folks. Other ideas is expansions and renovation to the Aslan Rec Center. So opportunity to have a recreational campus with expanded rec center and park space in the area in coordination with DHA. And second to last is the evaluating and considering expanding different types of classes and services that are offered in rec centers. So we've heard, people would like to see more classes and that would make them use the rec centers more often, but we also know they do offer a lot. So it's just an opportunity for people to understand what's actually offered there and to be able to help identify the gaps and needs from community members. And the last one came from our focus engagement, that the need for additional bilingual programming for rec centers to make it feel more welcoming for those that may not be able to speak English or English is not their first language. So that's the summary of some of the key recommendations that are coming out. Again, more detail is provided in the draft plan, but just a broad overview there. I'll turn over to you, Grace.
Okay. Maybe I'll give Cheney a little moment to open up we have a kind of we wanted to share our notes with you so you could help kind of make sure we're capturing everything accurately and kind of let us know if there's anything we're missing that you're saying. So as I mentioned before, one of our goals for this meeting is to do a better job of creating equal space for all the steering committee members to participate. So with that in mind, we're going to start each discussion kind of before we move into the more open-ended questions. We're going to start by asking the steering committee members to respond in the chat to sort of like a short answer question. And then I'm going to be following up with kind of individual steering committee members to hear more detail about kind of your answer to that question. And then we'll kind of go into more open-ended questions. So the first one we're going to do is on this topic of Parks and Rec. So want you to, so for the first question, we want you to respond to in the chat, and you can notice that the recommendations are kind of numbered on the slide. So we want you to take a moment and think about the different recommendations that Sung discussed for Parks and Rec and their potential impact on the near Northwest communities. So kind of think about the people that you know that live and work in these neighborhoods. And we want you to think about which idea do you think the community would be most excited about? Or kind of another way to look at that would be which idea do you think would have the most positive impact? And so if you could just start typing in the chat what ideas you kind of feel you're most excited about or be most impactful. Mike had a question about a draft handout. I think we're talking about the slide, just what you can see on the screen right now. So the numbered kind of summarized recommendations that are on the screen right now. So I'll probably just start as I start seeing these come in. So I see Lexi had said, sorry, let me scroll back up in the chat. Oh, there we go. Sorry. So we'll start. Or okay, actually. So we'll get to conversation about maybe what's might be missing for sure as we move forward. But we're going to just start with these kind of more what we're most excited about. So I'll start with actually Ramon. Ramon, you indicated that you were most excited about the initial park amenities, the tree canopy. Would you mind kind of chiming in and sharing a little more about why you were excited about that or why you felt it would be most impactful?
Well, I think about growing up in times that I had spent with family, doing family barbecues, and getting together. I think our parks are a place for a community to gather. I live in the Sunnyside neighborhood, and the Sunnyside Music Festival that happens in the summertime is a great place for neighbors to meet each other and to hang out. And I think that when we look for opportunities for that to happen, we also have an 18-month-old, and our parks are a good resource to take the baby to, and just in hanging out with her, we end up meeting a lot of our other neighbors, and that's when I think when we get a chance to meet each other, that's what makes neighborhood. So that's my thought.
Thank you for sharing that. And you feel like parks play an important role in creating those spaces for that. It sounds like they've been meaningful to you. And I noticed some folks have some questions. We'll get to those, but I just wanted to kind of start by touching in with different votes. So Lexi too, do you also indicated additional park and amenities? Did you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ramon. I think it's just a great way to, bring people out outside of their houses and to meet people, create more community. And a lot of people just don't have, huge backyards or all that opportunity to play. So I think kind of improving what we have seems like one of the best options, just because creating new parks is awesome. And I think it's just also has a lot more logistics to that. So kind of focusing on what we have and making those better, I think would be a great thing.
Great. Yeah. And bringing up like a lot of people don't have a lot of their own outdoor space. So how important those parks can be. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to see. I want to kind of try to touch base. So Gina, so for the different answers, Gina, and I think also Councilwoman Sandoval, you guys indicated the opportunity for new parks. So that's something that you guys were excited about. Did you want to share more about that?
So my office, and I probably could answer for Gina too, because she does constituent services. We get tons of complaints about lack of parks, specifically dog parks. So we don't have parks within all of these areas. Highland has pretty small parks. They have Hirshhorn Park, which feels like an off-leash dog park right now with no fences. And so if we could add, like in the industrial area of Sunnyside, there's not a nice park amenity over there. So if we could have this conversation of new parks, when I thought of new parks, I thought of new dog parks as well. Gee, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you and I have been working together for 7 years, so I've been thinking new dog parks too.
New dog parks. How about a big new park in the Sunnyside industrial area with a dog park and a big park? So everybody can play together without being attacked by dogs or afraid of dogs or having to worry about your dog, etc. So yep, ditto.
And I saw there was more questions about dog parks from NOLA as well. No, thank you for sharing that. And so before we kind of ask a more open-ended question about kind of what still is needed or what questions you have, I wanted to touch base with, so I saw a few people put number 5 on there, which is our expansion renovations to Athlon Rec Center. And let's see, I saw a couple people did that. Sorry, as I scroll through. Oh, Tripti, you said number 5, and then I also, yeah, and Lorenzo. Lorenzo, did you, or Tripti, did you want to share why you felt that, why you were excited or why it would be impactful for the Athlon Rec Center?
I'll let Lorenzo go first.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks, Tripti.
It's just a wonderful area, but I think, you know, it's been there for a long time. It really does need to be upgraded. And the community has always utilized it. And it's in a great location. There's a lot of land around it, which is amazing. And maybe to expand it, we wouldn't have to worry about, you know, land usage, hopefully, because the land is there. And just think it's time for an upgrade, or past time for an upgrade, actually.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Tripti, did you have anything else you wanted to add to for that?
Yeah, the park is, I mean, the rec center is small. If, you know, I've used our rec centers in the city and I would drive to go to a nicer one, like I would drive to go to Central Park, you know, even when I lived in Montclair and we had one over there. So this one is not one that would attract people to want to go there. People would go somewhere else. Right now, maybe, what is it, Schleider, you know, is probably the largest other one. And that too is small and outdated. So we need one in Northwest Denver that would actually get a lot more people and families to buy membership and use it more. And again, I think we talked about a splash pad, but you know, a campus with a lot of newer amenities, as well as for all of the people that are going to be moving into that area. That small part, the rec center would not work. It's got one small room, right? It's got a very small workout space. I've been in there. I would drive and go somewhere else.
No, thanks. Thank you for the feedback of the importance of improving the rec center so that it becomes like a destination for people in the neighborhood rather than them needing to travel outside. I do want to get to, because I want for each section, we also want you guys, and some of you have already been doing this in the chat, but we wanted you to kind of end the discussions by, and feel free to add more in the chat too if we don't get to you before we move on to the next topic. But we wanted to kind of end by having you guys thinking about, and a lot of you have addressed this in what you said so far, but what the community wants and needs from Parks and Rec in the near Northwest. And some of you have already kind of mentioned this in the chat, but do these recommendations get us there? And if not, what's missing, or what kind of questions or concerns do you have about it? And for this, it's just kind of open-ended. So if you want to put your hand up, if you have some thoughts about it, or feel free to enter things in the chat as well. Let's see. I know some earlier someone put about how important it is to make the streets safe around the parks for slower traffic. So maybe that's something that's missing, or they felt was missing. And sorry, I'm kind of scrolling through all of these. It might be missing.
Right in what line?
I don't know.
Sounds like it.
Here we go. Does anyone else want to kind of verbally share thoughts about what's missing or any concerns they have about these recommendations?
I've got my hand up. I don't know if you want me to go or not.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
there's several of us with our hands up, so I don't know
Yeah.
if you're able to
Oh,
see
yeah, I
the-
think I'm sorry. I'm not seeing the folks at the top. Perfect. All right. Let's start with Emily.
I was just gonna ask, so we actually did some research into getting a rec center pass this year, and that they're like tiered by cost. So I think if we talk about expanding the rec center, we have to make sure that it's also continues to be affordable. The Azatlan one was the cheaper option, and I think if we're still gonna have, we just want to make sure that it's still accessible to everyone in the neighborhood. If it does expand, that doesn't like exclude people as they join or want to join the rec center. That was my only like. I think it should be expanded, but I think it should be expanded and still maintain its, if it can maintain its status to be on the cheaper option.
No, thanks, Emily, for that input, just keeping
They don't-
affordability as a concern. And then I'll do Mike.
I have to hit mute.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to kind of make a comment about both number 1 and number 2 combined. I'm in the Jefferson Park neighborhood and just a couple blocks away from the park, which is an amazing place. And I would love to see the park activated more and more amenities. And on number 1, I mean, I get the idea that any opportunity for a new park somewhere is great, but I was kind of surprised to see the Diamond Hill area called out. And you know, I'm actually closer to Diamond Hill probably than Jefferson Park, and I wouldn't want a new park to divert too many resources from activating an existing park. So I just would want to make sure that, you know, that a new park wouldn't come in and all of a sudden that's the one that would get splash pads and, you know, nicer, you know, restrooms or, you know, that kind of thing. But just to not overlook the existing parks that we have.
No, thanks, Mike, for that feedback about not losing thought on the existing part. So we're kind of running out of time for this section, so I want to keep us kind of on track so we don't rush through the next ones, because I think I kind of did that last time. So if you have thoughts about this, you can add them in the chat so we don't miss them and we capture them still. So Lola and Trupti, if you could do that, and then we'll move on to the next topic, just because I want to make sure that we have time to get to all of these. So Cheney, thanks for navigating everything. Yeah, we'll go back to the presentation and we'll discuss food access, and then we'll come back for a discussion on that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Buglione. I'll be walking you through this food access section. So starting with food retail, just to recap, one of the issues we're trying to solve for is the inadequate supply of healthy food retail, particularly affordable stores within walking distance for a greater number of residents. So the first recommendation on the list is about proactive grocery recruitment. While there is market demand for a new full service store, we are limited by a lack of large developable lots. So we recommend several small and mid-sized stores to help fill this gap, particularly as a way to activate ground floor retail space within redevelopment projects. Realistically, subsidy and other incentives will be needed. There are several regional and statewide food access funding sources that could be leveraged to accomplish this. The second recommended area of focus is expanding the number of healthy corner stores and restaurants. Residents, we heard from, really want to see more healthy bodegas in their neighborhoods where they can buy affordable and culturally relevant food. Recruiting businesses in areas with the most significant food gaps could be facilitated through property owners and developers to increase the supply of neighborhood retail space, and then trying to recruit existing entrepreneurs from within the community as operators. The next section, community food access, relates to supporting innovative community-based initiatives that are working to reduce food insecurity and help fill gaps in food access for the most vulnerable residents. 3 is supporting and expanding existing initiatives was identified as a priority. Strategies include partnerships with social enterprises like Bondadosa that offer affordable grocery delivery. We also explored leveraging healthy housing loan programs. Also, DHA has a healthy living initiative, and those can be used to better incorporate pop-up food pantries and other programming into affordable housing developments. For lots of organizations in the neighborhoods that provide emergency and reduced cost food. That includes churches and food banks. Based on conversations with some of these groups, they would benefit from more resources to continue operating. Ideas included shared infrastructure like mobile food trucks to deploy more no-cost grocery pop-up. They're basically temporary markets and food pantries. Item number 5 is about spreading awareness of resources that exist. We think there are opportunities to work more with schools, healthcare providers, churches. And then the city's Department of Public Health and Environment has this Community Health Navigators program that could be leveraged to promote existing food resource sites. And also to expand awareness of resources like SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance, and increase enrollment. There may be an opportunity to develop a new site in the near Northwest for a community-based enrollment center. Finally, the next section relates to food production. One of the key opportunities for more residents to grow their own food and to access food grown in public places is to develop IGAs or intergovernmental agreements with schools, churches, institutions, hospitals, other institutions that have land to create shared open spaces for food growing. And then number 7 is about aligning jobs and job training priorities with fresh food, deploying programs to help local food entrepreneurs create healthy food businesses. There's been a lot of support for the idea of a new commissary or a shared commercial kitchen for the neighborhood that could provide some space, affordable space to incubate some new food businesses. So,
No, thank you for sharing that, Andrea. And then we'll give Cheney a second to kind of just pull this information up on our note-taking document. But we're gonna have a similar question to what we had for Parks and Rec. So just taking a moment and thinking about the recommendations for food access and their impact on your Northwest communities, and kind of thinking about the people you know that live and work here. And so what ideas do you think they would be excited about, or probably more relevant here, which ones do you feel like would be the most impactful? And kind of, if you can type in the chat, the number kind of corresponding to that kind of, that summary of recommendations. I'll probably just kind of start the conversation as these come in interest of time. So Nola, you said 1 and 2. Do you want to kind of share a little bit more why you felt those would be most impactful?
I think either trying to figure out new food access, retail, or improving what we have would be very exciting.
Thanks. Could you elaborate a little bit on why you feel, just because there's the lack of grocery store in the area, and so it'd be exciting to have a new one, or is there a particular reason that you gravitated towards that response?
It's just the most permanent and the most serves the most people. A lot of times I think some of the program oriented things are great, but they serve a lot smaller amount of people. So I'd like to see some more systemic changes in grocery store. And there's a lot of new nonprofit grocery store models coming out, including cooperative oriented models, or nonprofits that are focused on nutrition and health, that I think are things that we should recruit to come to these neighborhoods. And there's things I like about Save a Lot. I don't want to tear them down, but I would like a little something better there, and it's something healthier.
Something healthier as well. No, great. No, thank you for elaborating on that for us. I see that a lot of folks in the chat are also responding with number 1.
Hey, Grace,
Yeah,
can I respond to Nola and also just for this group? So Nola, if the Save a Lot could be expanded into something that was more full service, would that serve all of us much better? I mean, do you think that that is the location if that became full service, along with having what it has today, but also adding what they don't have? Because I agree with you. I would go to Save a Lot. My question is that something that this group, and especially folks in Chaffee and Sunnyside, think that that would be of value?
Yes.
I've talked to them already, and the owner would be willing to have a conversation. They own, a little bit, they own the more property. They have not the side of the liquor store, but the other side, they own that property. So it's something that they might be interested in. So, if before we decide that we can't Save a Lot, we can't Save a Lot, maybe it's worth that conversation about what's the feasibility of making that more full service for servicing more people in Chaffee. Thank you.
no, thanks, Trupti, for sharing that information about that as being a possibility, like a real possibility. I wanted to touch base with some other folks who maybe haven't had a chance to spoke. So Tim, I see that you put 1 and 7 on. I see other people have put 7. Maybe would you mind kind of sharing more information about why you picked 7 as something you were excited about or felt would be impactful?
Yeah, I think on 7, there's an opportunity to help create more businesses in the neighborhood and therefore more employment. And that would certainly all be positive.
Okay. And thanks for, bringing the employment aspect of it too. I know that people might also have kind of questions and concerns too. So wanted to make sure we touch on that in this conversation. So thinking about these different recommendations, does it when you kind of visualize food access in the future, does these recommendations get us to where we want to be, or what's missing, or what concerns do you have? I feel, Bill, you said that these are good examples of bullets, but you don't feel like the plan can have much impact. They should be good, but how will it have a impact? What did you have some specific concerns about how that made you feel that it wouldn't be able to be impactful? I think you're on mute. Sorry.
I just feel, as I said, that as we've gone through the planning process, there are areas where the plan can make very specific and very easily implemented suggestions. But then there are other areas of the plan where it really feels, sorry for this word, but it feels kind of squishy. It feels like we're, throwing stuff out there, but it's going to be hard to have to make an impact. And that's also the bridge to where we've had some discussions about, where do we go at the end of the plan? How do we really build beyond the plan? How does this group or other people in the community take this plan and really run with it? I think that's, if I was convinced that there was a mechanism for running with these things, then I think I'd be less pessimistic, but sorry, maybe I'm just being pessimistic today.
Is there something you think that could be added to the food access area to make it more like there be kind of more of those implementable type
I think if we took it down one level further and we were able to talk about ideas for specific incentives, it's one thing to talk about identifying or encouraging. Those words don't really take me very far. I think what we want to try to do is find ways of truly incentivizing these things, and how can that be done And is it through the city itself? Is it through other governmental organizations? Is it through nonprofits? Is it through community groups? How do we really find and build a structure of incentives? To me, that's the best way for us to be able to take this and have it have a little bit more impact.
No, thank you for sharing that, the need for having more specifics on the incentives and the types of things.
Correct.
Yeah, and I would just add the recommendations in the draft plan does provide more detail than these bullets. So it would be helpful, Bill, if as you review of the food section, be like, hey, this is one example where maybe we could dig a little bit deeper, maybe do a little bit more research and provide specificity. So that would be helpful in terms of the more detailed review that we're going to do for the next few weeks.
And I'm not sure if the some of this is laid out, but there was a question about who would be responsible for creating and implementing the incentives.
Yeah, it would have to be a partnership with folks that are DEDO, the Economic Development Department, along with our public health department. So just kind of working with our partner agencies. As CPD, our wheelhouse is zoning and land use, but it's our responsibility to also work with our partner agencies like parks and how we deal with mobility with the Department of Transportation. So working with them to identify those specific incentives and kind of implementation actions moving forward.
No, thanks. Did that clarify? I think that was a question from Lexi. Lexi, did that clarify that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of agree with what Bill said. I mean, it's just kind of like, I felt like reading through everything was a lot of like, these are all great, but like, I think I still struggle with how it's going to be like implemented. And I know it's like going to be referenced, this plan is going to be referenced when like we deal with rezonings and things like that. And I know that it's going to come into play. I think I just struggle with like, again, just everything that he said, it just kind of feels who is creating the incentive, who is helping with the money, who is helping with these connections and the business, groups and all the things that are in the, the plan. I think I just kind of also struggle with that, but I know it's just kind of going to be these one-off things that, the plan is referenced, and then we can come back and say, oh, we should put food service here, or we should approve a rezoning to allow a bodega on this corner where it's single family, like maybe those kind of things. I think I just, yeah, I just kind of agree with that. It feels a little bit broad.
Yeah, so I think in the comments and what you're saying, Lexi, we're hearing like a want for more specificity.
Yeah.
And then we want to give you guys a 5-minute break. So feel free, if you had things that you wanted to share, you can type those in the chat or share them with us during the break, but we want to give you guys 5 minutes. No, I'm sorry.
We have one more topic.
No, we're going to move on to the next topic before we do break. Sorry. So sorry, we're going to go back to the slides to talk about the next group of recommendations. And I wasn't. So sorry about that. And if we didn't quite have time to get to your comment, if you could add it in the chat. And so
hello,
now,
everyone. This is
ahead, Brad.
yeah, it's Brad. It's Brad Siegel. So welcome to the edition of Speed Dating on Retail. And the plan has 27 different strategies on preserving retail within the neighborhoods. One of the greatest assets of all these neighborhoods really are these neighborhood business districts. So there are 300 storefronts in the area, 9 different business districts that range from Platt Street to 32nd, and then of course the corridors, Federal 38th, and everything in between. 90% of the existing businesses are characterized as local, independent, neighborhood serving businesses. So not a lot of franchises and chains, and going through the process, speaking both to the community and also to the businesses themselves, people really value these business districts as assets. So again, we've got 27 strategies within the plan. Most of these are tailored to near Northwest neighborhoods. Handful of them are also carried from other MPI plans as well. So the top six, if you will, that we've got on the slide to capture the essence of that. Number one was to create a business alliance among all these different business districts to market to the neighborhoods and also to access city resources and support. One thing that is apparent in near Northwest area is your business districts are less organized than other parts of the city. So we only have one business improvement district, that's at Federal and 25th. We don't have a lot of active merchants associations. So to try to build that capacity where these neighborhood business districts can better compete and better collaborate. Number two, as they evolve, is to promote business improvement districts in selected districts. And there are about 15 of these now throughout the city, but again, only one in these neighborhoods. Three, the city through the Economic Development Office is creating an initiative on what they call legacy businesses. These are businesses that have been serving neighborhoods for decades and are really part of the fabric of those neighborhoods in all of our outreach, both our English and our Spanish-speaking outreach. These legacy businesses were really seen as key anchors and culturally critical to the vitality of our neighborhoods. So really positioning near Northwest in a position where it could take advantage of some of these incentives that hopefully will be popping soon on this legacy business program. Number four is to work with neighborhood entrepreneurs to fill gaps for goods and services. Many of these were identified in the briefing book and in some of the work done before the plan even started. Number five, and this is something we borrowed from some of our other plans, was to simplify adaptive reuse and permitting processes. This is when someone puts a new business use in an existing commercial space. Oftentimes, this will trigger reuse requirements that are cost prohibitive for that business. So it's a good example of immediate implementation. In the Colfax area plans, this was one of the initial areas of implementation, was to cut some of these requirements so that businesses could more easily reuse existing businesses. And then number six, real estate ownership. Really the only way to preserve a business over time is to help the business actually acquire the real estate. So you'll see this in the housing section as well. We talk about a community land trust. Shout out to NOLA, who's been giving us some feedback on this, and who also, NOLA, we haven't forgotten the best practices, so we'll still be reaching out to you on that. There are also some city incentive programs and other ways to build ownership. So with that, thanks for the heart, thanks for the love. And with that, I think, Grace, it goes to you to make some sense of our spin through small business.
No, thanks, Brad. I like your comparison to the speed dating. And so again, this will be a similar question, and just kind of a reminder that the discussion in the chat is going to be with the steering committee. And then at the end of during the last 10 minutes, we'll have time for addressing questions and comments from the public, the last 10 minutes of our meeting. But for now, we're focusing on the steering committee for the discussion. So for this question, kind of similar, looking at these recommendations and strategy. So if you can take a moment to look at the different recommendations that we discussed for cultural, retail, and small business and their potential impact on the near Northwest. So thinking about the people that live and work in these neighborhoods, what are you most excited about, or what do you think will be the most impactful, kind of from this, just kind of summarized list of six recommendations, or 6 groups of recommendations. So I'm seeing some folks comment on 1 and 6. Let's see, or maybe I'm. So Melissa from Councilwoman's office, you said 3 and 6. Would you mind sharing why you were excited about those or what you felt would be most impactful?
I think that there's several, I think everyone can think of some of the legacy businesses in the area, and finding a way to support them long-term is important. In addition to having opportunities such as community land trust for future businesses.
Thanks for sharing that, Melissa. I also noted, Ramon, you also said 1 and 6. Did you have anything you wanted to add to what Melissa said about that?
You know, I do think that having the conversation among entrepreneurs to be aware of sort of best practices in sort of, so I think having, you know, those business alliances to, you know, maybe where they can share some things, and you probably have to have some kind of organized forum for that outlet to come. And then also the real estate component of it is there are a lot of SBA programs that are available out there. And I think sometimes the entrepreneur gets in the weeds with their business, and we can think of, you know, some strong local businesses that we own that may not actually own the real estate. And if nobody ever introduces them with the idea, they just never pursue it because they're just wrapped up with their business. So I think education is very important component to that. And I think if you had these alliances, maybe other people would talk about, hey, this is what I did. This is how it worked for me. And then, you know, it creates an opportunity to share.
No, thanks, Ramon, for kind of emphasizing that value of kind of building these connections and sharing knowledge, that aspect of it. I'm gonna, let's see. I noticed there was a comment from Jamie. Jamie, do you go by Jamie or do you go by Linda?
Well, it's Jamie for legal reasons, but I do go by Linda.
Okay.
So either one, whatever you're fine.
Okay. You had mentioned where the numbers on BIPOC businesses owners in the north side.
Yeah,
what numbers were you curious about?
Well, I see so many new businesses being open, but they're businesses that the original members of this community probably would not, you know, go to because they can't afford it.
So maybe an important piece would be encouraging businesses that are also affordable for residents.
For the residents that have been here for their whole life, because there's a new business pretty much popping up every other month in my neighborhood, but I can't afford to frequent those businesses.
Yeah, so and thinking about encouraging small business, encouraging businesses that can serve the diversity of the community, not just people who have higher incomes.
And then also, what are we doing to attract entrepreneurs who have been here their whole life and giving them the ability to be able to afford to start or provide a service or a business in this neighborhood? Because I know the land property, like you're saying, is nobody can afford that unless you're a developer, and rents and everything. I just, like, if you've been in, I could never afford to start a business in my community. So what are we doing for those people?
And I think that maybe the plan speaks to this a bit. Did anyone on the consulting or from the city want to talk about, because maybe the land trust or different ideas like that maybe need more explanation to understand how they would support the cost of starting a new business?
Yeah, I was just typing a response actually that I think the plan could be more specific, that we're more intentional about connecting different incentives to neighborhood residents that might be interested in forming new businesses. And of course,
So what kind of neighborhood residences though?
Well, anyway, there's plenty of entrepreneurial energy, plenty of people in the neighborhoods who would want to start a small business. So are there ways to tailor pathways for those neighborhood residents? Really,
are we
anyone.
targeting Black and Brown and Indigenous and Native people in this community? Because yes, there are plenty of pathways, but what are we doing to attract a specific type of owner?
Yeah, well, that could be part of it. So targeting specific types of owners could be part of it. BIPOC populations, there are existing city programs to do that. So to me, part of the challenge here is connecting the folks in need with the resources that exist today.
No, and Jamie, thanks. Hearing your input it helps us and put ideas into the plan that focus on those different issues. So thank you for bringing that up. So before we kind of go on our break, I wanted to kind of ask the question of what we feel like is missing from these recommendations. And Jamie, I think you spoke to that some already, but did anyone else want to add to what's missing or anything that concerns them about this list?
The how?
So Trupti kind of similar to feedback on the last one, just more specifics on the how.
And is the draft recommendation, this stage of it, so I want to be just clear, on this stage and with the recommendations, are we supposed to cover the recommendations and the how in this, or is the and how another phase? I think it's this one, but I just want to be clear.
Sung, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, the recommendations are an opportunity to identify the issue and the hows. So the hows are the specific strategies that we're listing off to obtain the policy. I think maybe you're also thinking about like how we start thinking about priorities and such as that. Is that correct or no?
Well, yeah, it's, again, I think plans kind of indicate a lot of the needs, the desires, the wants, but without the actual, this is how we will get from wanting it to getting it. That's the part I'm wondering. And I think maybe this kind of is back to, maybe some of the skepticism in the previous section about how will we get there and will we get there? And a lot of people talk about, we have lots of plans. We just don't implement them. We just create new plans.
Right. And then, yeah, I would say, some policies are help to make, day-to-day decision-making, and others are specific items that we need to implement. So, as you review the section and, things don't feel like they're direct enough, or they feel like, they raise more question marks than answers, I feel free to raise that, and we could kind of, narrow in on some of the strategies or policies that feel a little bit vague and less specific.
Thank you.
So we're getting a chance to look at these draft recommendations now, and that'll kind of inform revisions, but then you're going to kind of get to give feedback on them again when they go out to the public. So it'll kind of continue to be refined as we move forward. I know two folks have their hands raised, but I also want to making sure you guys have time for a break before we move into the next line of discussion. So I actually see quite a few people with their hands raised. So what we could do is we can take a 5-minute break, and then if you had input you wanted to share, you could share that during the break or write it in the comments. And we'll come back at 7:02.
I just wanted to say, I hear Jamie or Linda, your frustration and other people's frustration on this plan. I think that I had a conversation with the planners the other day saying how complicated this is. And I live, breathe, and eat this. It's my job as your elected representative to understand this. And I had my staff help with comments, and it was really hard. And it was really challenging, and it's very frustrating because it does not feel like it's speaking to us, and I'm just going to say those of us who were born and raised in the North Side and are Northsiders. And it's also hard for those people who are new to the neighborhood on how to make sure that we are understanding these complex documents like Blueprint Denver. It just used to be areas of change and areas of stability, and it was super easy. And then we provided guidance for that. And now we have Blueprint Denver, and we have this growth strategy, and we have the parks plan, and we have the Dottie plan, and you name it, it's alphabet soup. And so I just want you to know, all of you on here, that I feel your frustration as well, and it's super confusing for me as well. And however I can be assistance to you, if you need to call me, you need to text me, you want to meet for coffee, you want to meet for a drink, please do that, because this is just as confusing for me as it is for you, and I want the best outcome for all of you. That's why I ran, is because I love this North Side, man. This is my heart. I want it for the next 7 generations. And that's what I hear all of you saying too. So I take this super serious. So if you need to leverage my office, I'm just a phone call away. Okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, because like you, I was born and raised in the North Side, my whole family, everything. This is my community, and I've seen it. I've seen the changes, and it's so frustrating on so many levels. And you know everything that I'm talking about, because I know where you come from too. And so, yeah, I just want to make it accessible for everybody, because it's not. So thank you. I would love to communicate at some point.
Oh, hey, Bill. Look what I got. My little stress busters. Fostering rescues.
Oh my
That's
God, they are
great.
so cute.
I don't know
Look
what,
at them.
they're adoptable. Oh, wait, I gotta clean my camera. Geez, what happened there? But yes, they're adoptable. They're only 7 weeks.
I'm jealous.
Don't be. There's a lot of waking up early and cleaning and bathing.
What kind of dogs are they?
Oh, mutts from a kill shelter. Basically, I know, I was not planning on doing this, but the desperate pleas of emails every day about who was going to be euthanized, I just lost it. And I was like, all right, I'll do it.
Oh,
They look like a shepherd mix.
Yeah, I think this
They
one's
do.
got a pit bull on him. This is the one I like. That's my favorite, this guy. He's got like little green eyes. They're so cute. They're so cute.
Oh, so
Well,
cute.
I'm just gonna enjoy the break.
Oh, we're good. Well, I think it's 7:02, at least by my clock. So if you're back, if you could turn on your video so we kind of know you're there. I did like the puppies in the puppy break. I have a puppy I adopted when was very little, and she's a handful.
It's puppy planning.
Yeah.
It's puppy planning.
Yeah, my first dog was an angel, so I was not prepared for my very puppy second dog. It's very wild. So. Okay, so Cheney's gonna kind of lead us through the second half of the meeting. We're gonna be talking about preserving and growing primary jobs, but then we're also gonna kind of touch in on land use ideas for the Sunnyside kind of industrial area. So if Cheney, if you wanted to touch on that. Yeah, thanks, Grace. So our next set, we're gonna do also in two conversations. We're gonna save the majority of the rest of the meeting to talk through some land use. How these job recommendations influence land use decisions, especially in Northeast Sunnyside. But first, we want to go over this title of preserving and growing primary jobs. So we have 7 recommendations listed here. Some stats on the right side of the plan, if you want to read those, or on the right side of the slide, if you want to read those. But number 1 is to connect major employers in the industrial areas with schools to provide more apprenticeships and job training opportunities. So think North High, CEC, those education opportunities, connecting them with employers to find jobs and train. Exploring opportunities to add more retail and craft manufacturing beyond breweries and distilleries in these areas. So they are, most of the areas that we're talking about are zoned industrial. And so exploring opportunities to build onto what we currently think of industrial in terms of like large buildings and manufacturing, but also build in opportunities and recruit businesses that are smaller and support more entrepreneurship, but fit into that category. Identifying businesses, number 3, identifying businesses through the city's legacy business program that may be considered cultural or historic destinations. So think especially in the Northeast Sunnyside area, Mile High Comics, Torino Macizo, and others that we will identify. Number 4, Chaffee Park Industrial, really the recommendation is to support that area. It is defined as a industrial preservation area within the city of Denver. And so we have not heard any opinions otherwise. So we want to support that as a high value manufacturing district. It provides a lot of good paying jobs and has more recent infrastructure. Sunnyside Industrial is a recommendation to enact a net zero job loss policy. There's approximately 1,000 jobs in that area today. And we'll talk about these when we get into the land use, but Blueprint Denver has envisioned that area as a potential area to grow and add in a more mix of use. And we just want to make sure that if the area does change, it's not 100% residential. It's not, you know, removing jobs from the area, but you know, if jobs do decide to move out of the area, that new development will replace those jobs. Number 6, ensuring that any new mixed use development is compatible with those industries, knowing that the area will change over time and there needs to be compatible uses. So thinking about industries and businesses like the smaller manufacturing, retail, craft, like live work units, for example. And then number 7, where potential for involuntary displacement is identified, evaluate and implement methods to mitigate that displacement. So providing incentives to keep those businesses in place if they want to remain. We talked about property ownership in the last slide, but that is an example here as well, or other assistance that may be available. And Dido, I just made a note here that Dido is already talking to a few businesses like Mile High Comics. We've been connecting those business owners with Dido, and I think Joanne is here from Dido and can talk more about that. So just to quickly go over the stats, there's approximately 18,000 total jobs in near Northwest today. There's 2,000 industrial jobs approximately, and we anticipate a job growth in the next 20 years to add 6,000 to 8,000 new jobs. And a lot of those, you know, up to 30% by our standards could be industrial jobs. And so they need a place to go. And we need to retain the workforce jobs and training.
opportunities. Also acknowledging that higher paid jobs and workplace trends are changing, so more work from home. So just acknowledging that there's not a lot of new commercial, especially offices being built right now. We don't have a crystal ball, but we know that you know, the pandemic and other means have changed that. So just paying attention to current trends and acknowledging that as well. So we will go back to enter into the discussion. I'm gonna jump out of here and
So,
back into note
Janie,
taking.
could you
Yep.
speak to what the acronym, the DIDO, stands for?
Yeah, Department of Economic Development and Opportunity, I believe. Sometimes I get them wrong.
So we'll again start this conversation with kind of the same question, kind of thinking about your neighborhood and your neighbors, and your experiences there. Which one of these ideas are you guys feeling the most excited about or feeling could have the most impact? Now, these are kind of like summarizing the recommendations in the plan, but if you could put a number in the chat and we can start some conversation. So Emily said yay for number one. Emily, do you want to share more why you're excited about number one, connecting major employers to industrial areas with schools?
Sure. I mean, I work at CEC. I do their college and post-secondary planning, and you know, they have a welding room and they have a architecture class, and they have culinary classes, and they you know, the students are trained in all of these things at school. It would be great to see. We also have an internship program that's available for students through DPS, so it'd be great to see students able to work and get connections with jobs within their within the neighborhood where their school is and where most of them live. And I think we talked about this originally, where like people who wanted to improve things on their homes but couldn't afford the cost or the price of, you know, a remodel or contracting. Like, is there a way to subsidize some of that with support from an apprenticeship program with students? You know, like those types of opportunities. I think that they're there, and I think the principals at both schools, I know CEC for sure, but maybe even at North as well, are super open to that type of partnership.
No, thanks, Emily, for sharing kind of that inside knowledge of kind of what's going on in the schools. That's helpful to know. Like that these are possibly could be easy connections to build. And Anissa, who I think you're standing in for Leslie tonight. Is that correct? You said
I'm standing in for Renee.
Oh, for Renee, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would say that the industrial jobs mitigating or reducing the amount of job loss is probably very connected with point number one. But we talked about how there's a lot of residents in that area who are already connected with that type of industrial work. And so ensuring that through these development plans, ensuring that they still have jobs afterwards. And that's going to allow that sense of place and also mitigate the displacement. So some of them are linked in together.
No, thank you for sharing more on that. I think a lot of folks have listed kind of quite a few different ideas, but I'm seeing a lot of 7 showing up and 5 showing up pretty frequently. Trupti, I saw Trupti, you said 5 and 7. Do you want to speak to kind of, and we're going to go into the net zero job loss policy, I think maybe a little more as we go into the Sunnyside industrial. So maybe you could speak more to why you're excited about 7, because I know we're going to go into more detail on that more, but you could speak to either.
I think they're kind of self-explanatory,
Yeah.
to be honest. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. All right, so maybe I'll go into the question too of like, is there anything we see kind of missing with this list, or is there anything we're concerned about on this list that we kind of you don't think that that needs to be improved or anything that we feel like is missing from this idea of preserving and growing primary jobs.
All right, I have a question on that. If it's okay for me to ask right now.
Yeah, I don't think anyone else has their hand up. Go ahead.
So one of the questions I have with the zero loss piece of it, right? How will we do that? How much of current industry is going to stay? And I'm struggling to figure out how we'll get to the zero loss when if somebody owns a building and they want to sell it, if Dawn Foods moves, because eventually it's still not going to work for them because of the amount of, how will we do that? And how much of the acreage that's out there needs to stay exactly as it is to maintain the 1,000 units? Maybe it's an easy thing. I don't know. But that's the question I have is, what properties are we identified and say that must remain this because that is a big building which could house some kind of manufacturing? So, do we know?
That's a great question and lead into our land use discussion here. So that is a policy that we're still trying to wrap our heads around. And to Cheney's point, it does have large implications and influence from how we make our land use decisions. So that's what we're going to discuss next.
Okay, thank you.
Did anyone else have like clarifying questions or just like thoughts or concerns about this before we kind of go into more of the kind of ideas for more specific ideas for land use in the Sunnyside area? Oh, all right, Cheney, whenever you feel ready. Thanks. Cheney's also taking notes tonight, so she's got her hands full.
Okay, yes, let's jump back to the presentation and I'll share my screen. Okay, so based on those economic and job goals, we've been looking more closely at the Northeast area of Sunnyside in terms of all of these questions, how those economy goals impact land use decisions. This is zooming in on the area that we'll be focusing on. So orange is industrial zoned land. The red outline is what Blueprint Denver defines as that future community center. So as you can see, the red area outlined is where the most productive industrial uses and jobs are. And so we are trying to find a balance, acknowledging that this area is good for growth, given the location near 41st and Fox, near I-25, 70, downtown, while being careful about unintended consequences of losing those good paying jobs that could have negative economic impacts. And just some stats in the area, and this is the red outlined area, is approximately 90 acres and has about 1,000 employees. The building stock is older than Chaffee Park's industrial area, as I said, so the infrastructure is aging a bit more. And there are less active uses. A lot of the uses, especially over east of Lipan, between Lipan and the railroads, there's a lot of storage uses and less active, less people coming and going. Go to the next slide. So this slide has a side-by-side comparison showing what Blueprint Denver has identified for this area. And again, that red outline is showing that the dark green is Blueprint Denver's, what Blueprint Denver identifies as future growth areas. And then on the right is future place designation as a community center. And so if you're familiar with like 9th in Colorado, for example, that transformed from a hospital complex into a mixed use district. that is a similar transition strategy that is in the current Blueprint Denver. As we know, that type of development is drastically different than what's on the ground. We've been meeting with property and business owners regularly. Bill and Trupti, Renee have been a part of those. And so we've been discussing overall goals and land use strategies. We've also worked with the larger the community. In each of the online surveys and the community meetings we've been going to, we've known that this area would come up as a sticky point in the plan. So we anticipated that, and we asked in the online surveys and at the community meetings in phase 2 about what is the general priorities for this area. And then in this last phase of engagement, we did show some future land use scenarios and asked people to choose which one they like the most and to comment on those. And so from those community conversations and stakeholder meetings, we've developed a list of key priorities that we think summarize important ideas and themes that are most agreed upon for the area, so that we can at least get some parameters from which to grow the future land use decisions. And so there was a lot of agreement around mobility, that this area needs improved pedestrian and bicycle connectivity. There's a lot of gaps in the sidewalk infrastructure. For example, in this area, it has the most red on the sidewalk gap map. So there's not even sidewalks in a lot of the area. So that became a priority. Improving streetscapes, adding the sidewalks that don't exist, dealing with parking management and transportation demand management solutions. So that means, having adequate parking, but also this being a transit rich environment with bus service and light rail, having more options and incentives for people to not drive their car and instead use transit or bike. And so putting that infrastructure in place. Maintaining access for trucks on 46th and 47th, especially knowing that those areas, Dawn Foods and others, have a lot of truck traffic coming in and out. And so finding a balance between that and improving those streets for pedestrians and bicyclists can be challenging, but it's not impossible. Around quality of life, this is also a heat island area, so increasing tree canopy is an agreed upon, strategy. Prioritizing green infrastructure. We know that the Sunnyside Basin is a priority for the city, and that this area lacks infrastructure to manage stormwater, and so that is an important strategy. Renovating and expanding the Atzland Rec Center that we talked about in the parks discussion. Accommodating new park space, which we talked about, and increasing food access in this area, which we also talked about tonight. For land use and economy, as always, affordable housing should be a priority in this area. Creating a sense of place is important. Mitigating involuntary displacement, dealing with this idea of net zero job loss. Retaining some of the industrial character, it helps tell the story and the history of this place. And so it is important that, that some of that remain no matter what happens. This is a workforce place. These are workforce jobs. And so preserving that as a destination for workforce as well as innovation. And then whatever, new development, when new development does come in, this example of a picture on the right is, an industrial or research and development building a new structure, but making sure that when those new buildings come in, they are high quality and have human scale design. So just some pictures of some industrial areas that transform kind of before and afters. So on this slide is some colored maps that may look familiar. These are some of the maps that we've been showing in the industrial stakeholder meetings as well as the online surveys. On the left is Blueprint Denver's guidance So that is that whole industrial area shown as a future mixed use community center. The dark brown along the rail line is higher density housing. And then as the colors get lighter, it's less dense. So in the yellow, think 3 to 4 stories. In the orange, think 5 to 7. In the brown, 8 to 12. And so we've shown on the far right our other ideas that we've explored, and we got a lot of feedback from the online survey and stakeholder meetings. And in the middle is where we are. This is where we've sort of landed, and we want to pass by the steering committee and get your feedback on this. So there are some common themes again in the land use that were agreed upon, or ideas that were consistently shown as people agreeing with them. And I'll walk through those on the next slide. So the themes that are pretty agreed upon are providing an activation around 46 and Pecos, especially if the unnamed park becomes perhaps named and and the chain link fence taken down, and it becomes more of a community gathering space surrounding that area and that intersection with more active uses, neighborhood services. There's not a lot of restaurants in the area for the employees, for example, so having places to walk and grab lunch or have a drink after work. And also providing a gateway into, a lot of people enter Denver from this area, and after I-70, this really is a gateway opportunity. So encouraging those mixed use closer to 46 and Pecos, as well as around the station. So a lot of the feedback we got when we showed the alternatives were that, why don't we just focus more of the mixed use near the station? It makes sense. That's where the density is. And so we've modified that and shown more of a community center. So community center in this area is just a higher density. Think, 3 to 4 stories, 2 to 4 stories really around Pecos and 46, whereas around the station, as that development's already starting to occur, 8 stories and so up to 8 stories is. And then preserving industrial while allowing some mix of uses is the direction we're going with the purples. So the dark purple, this is the area that is currently the most intense industrial area. So maintaining that as a value manufacturing area, and acknowledging that those are productive jobs and uses that support the neighborhood economically today. A revision is also to turn everything else in that area as a light purple, and that designation in terms of land use is called Innovation Flex. And it sort of loosens the industrial. It's not strictly manufacturing or those big giant buildings. This is a designation that allows a greater mix of uses, including residential, but also encourages jobs and innovation. And so, so this is drastically different from Blueprint Denver. Rather than coloring this all community center and anticipating a high density mixed use area like 9th and Colorado, we're sort of saying, allowing some of that to happen, but protecting what's on the ground and allowing those businesses to remain and thrive in the area and really working around them. And so to do that, we've, there is certain growth calculations anticipated. And so you can start to see a little more orange. For example, future Quig Newton redevelopment could see higher density residential, for example, to allow enough residential growth to be supported while maintaining those jobs and those industrial area character. We've also layered on some additional guidance. We have had a lot of discussion about you know, when is the 47th Avenue Bridge going to happen? When is Quick Newton going to develop? And these are all questions that we don't have the answer to. So we've added this hatched area, and this is the one-to-one kind of net job loss or replacement of jobs policy that, you know, if and when this area, you know, a catalyst project being the 47th Avenue Bridge. We've talked to a lot of industrial business owners that say, you know, when that bridge comes in, it's just, our business won't be viable anymore. But until then, we want to be supported. And then there are other things like Don Foods, for example, a large employer in the area. You know, if they were to move, that could transform. So there are these catalyst projects that could trigger the area to be become more of a mixed use place. And so we just want to be mindful about when that happens, and when redevelopment does happen in that area, that jobs are replaced. And then providing community benefits and transitions to the neighborhood. So in red are public and nonprofit owned land. So it's basically state, city, or DHA owned land is everything in red. And so we want to make sure that those areas specifically and especially provide community benefiting uses such as affordable housing and open space if and when they redevelop. And then requiring active nodes. So we've had a lot of discussion about, well, when new development comes in, you know, it replaces existing commercial and then 100% residential goes up. So we want to add a layer of certainty in specific areas that would require active ground floor activation. And those are the yellow areas. So around 46 and Pecos, around 41st and Jason and Inca, really trying to activate those places and make sure that they redevelop in the way that's envisioned. Higher density along the rail as a buffer to the railroad was an agreed upon solution, general consensus around that, and then transitioning into lower density as you get into the neighborhood, closer to the neighborhood. Okay, so those are the slides, and now we're going to go, as we've been doing, into discussion. So I'm going to switch over to our note taking, and if you need, Grace, I see you talking, but I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. So before we're going to do a chat question. Before we did that, I just not like policy questions, but if anybody has any just clarifying questions, if anything didn't kind of make sense or they wanted clarified before we kind of go into our discussion. Was there anything that was unclear for folks? Because I know it's a lot of information to take in.
Can you remind me how long the time frame, like, you know, how long are these plans expected to be within the works before they're rethought again? You know, like, for example, like you know, zoning code maybe happens every 50 years or something, and with some kind of overlays. Like, how long will these plans, how long are they foreseen for this sort of to be in existence before maybe modifications happen?
No, thanks, Ramon. I think Courtney responded in the chat that so as we kind of discussed before, it's a 20-year plan. So it's looking out for 20 years. Yeah. Did anyone else have clarifying questions before?
Ron, if I understood you correctly too, though, I mean, current plan guidance is a community center. So it wouldn't stop anybody from potentially putting in a rezoning request to change their property to create a mixed use building there. So that's why we're talking about land use guidance today and the timing of those changes. And sorry, I was typing in an answer, so maybe I didn't fully understand that, but I did want to add that in.
No, thanks, Sung, for adding that detail. So for this one, we kind of wanted to just kind of get your gut reaction. You know, this can be kind of based on your expertise or just based on what you're feeling as a resident kind of in the neighborhood. But we wanted you to put in the chat a plus sign, a negative sign, or an equal sign. And a plus sign would kind of indicate you're kind of liking the direction that we're going by changing from the community center to this kind of more nuanced approach. And you see more benefits than costs. A negative sign would be you're seeing more problems than benefits. And then an equal sign would be kind of you're kind of in the middle of if we take this approach. So I'm seeing a couple of plus signs. Tim, do you want to elaborate on why you said plus?
Sure. Yeah, I think getting the community center and community supporting areas, local center, where they're actually needed rather than up in what's now an industrial zone makes way better sense than what we saw in Denver.
Great, thanks, Tim. Ramon, I'm going to touch base with you. You have kind of negative to equal signs, so somewhere in between there. Would you mind sharing with us what maybe some of your concerns are about this approach?
I just wonder if it's not, if there's not more that should be planned. I think things are going to happen more aggressively. So when I think we hear about the conversation about industrial and trying to maintain jobs, I mean, there's no basis to this. But and maybe there's, you know, people at the city that could look for other places where this happened. It seems like if we don't get ahead of it, there's going to be a lot of zoning change requests, because I just don't think that over the short term that industrial is going to actually survive. The land's going to be too expensive and going to be too valuable, and there's going to be so much other development going on around Fox Street that I just think organically it's going to happen faster. And so I think just more thought should be put into, if that's going to happen, inevitably, how can we get ahead of it so we can get things to happen the way that the community wants it to happen.
No, thank you, Ramon. Did you have, and for sharing that concern. Yeah, was there any concerns you had specifically about the development that you felt like we should get ahead of?
Well, I think mainly as it relates to industrial, I think that things are going to transform to mixed use right away. And I think we got to think about what kind of jobs do we want in that area, or what kind of industry support it. But I wouldn't look at it purely from an industrial perspective or having manufacturing in the area. I just think that those businesses or industries are going to want to move out to some other larger transportation corridors or some other places where the real estate isn't as expensive.
No, thank you for elaborating on that and on how, like, yeah, you may feel like they naturally move out because of cost. I wanted to touch base with Nola. She had a plus to equal sign on this and also had her hand up.
Yeah, I agree with some of Ramon's statements, and I just wanted to add, I think I'm a little bit worried, my hesitation, I guess, because I think it's better than just the community center, what we have in Blueprint Denver. Like, I think it's better than that, this more specific, but I think it's still, I think it's a little bit too intense, and in the sense of, like, it is going to drive up prices overall. And from a perspective of home ownership development, there's no like where's the home ownership part? I mean, we could do condos, yeah, but that's a certain, I mean, that's a certain type of home ownership that not everybody wants. We also want to have some townhomes, you know, some things so that people can have yards. And I know we've talked about, and I know it's like maybe an overlay to this or something like that, but the zoning has to reflect that too. And I feel like maybe in some of that, I can't remember what it's called now, the 3-4 story, you know, that should be a little bit more specific, like a little bit lower scale. It's just, this is all, I've seen this, I'm seeing this at the National Western as well, that's also categorized as a community center. And the expectation of this like really intense, dense development, I think is too much. I think it's harmful to neighborhoods that have experienced a lot of harm in the past in areas like this that have been kind of polluted and had mixed use industrial development. And I think there's an equity component to it too that needs to be stronger. So yeah.
And are you saying for the kind of the equity piece is having, because I know you were speaking about the residential too, like what types of residential do you feel like would be more conducive to that?
I think, I mean, I think it's good to increase density from like single family homes, but like townhomes, attached row houses, cottage homes, you know, the types of things that people want to live in for home ownership as well.
Thank you for that input. I'll look back at the chat. Jamie, you commented that people are willing, who live here that are willing to work industrial jobs aren't going to live there. They'll have to travel their community to work. So you're concerned, yeah. Go ahead.
They're going to be priced out, especially once Quig Newton is gone. Those are your industrial workers. Once Quig Newton is gone, and those high-priced condos, townhomes that are still supposedly going to have a percentage of low-income families, no one's going to be able to afford to live in that low housing anymore. Is going to go. They're going to have to be priced out of their own community. And they're going to have to travel back into their neighborhood in order to work.
And then Jamie, I'm hearing what you're saying. Would you think that like kind of the strength of saying the importance of affordable housing, would that be something you would want to focus on in the plan to kind of address that concern, the importance of keeping affordable housing in the community? Or are you saying that
yes,
maybe we don't need to focus on the
like
industrial
Ms.
jobs?
Sandoval is saying Quig Newton, yeah, like Miss Sandoval saying Quig Newton can't go away, but Sun Valley went away.
I mean, Anissa, I mean, is this an opportunity to maybe speak to, you know, if future changes were to happen in Quig from affordable housing and kind of, you know, standpoint, you know, what I understand is that you retain residents in the area to an extraordinary amount and also, you know, provide way more affordable housing than that already exists today.
Yeah, and like Sun Valley is being redeveloped, and sure, there's designated amounts of homes that need to be affordable, but you're looking at Sun Valley Community in Denver, and now no matter how much affordable housing you have projects provided, and then they're saying affordable housing, and you look at affordable housing, I'm a teacher, I don't even make $60,000 a year, and they're saying anything under 60,000, they have like, they're building a $500 or 500 apartment right there where how much of that is affordable housing? Who can even still afford the affordable housing?
No, thank you, Jamie, for sharing that. And I think that we've been hearing that kind of the importance of keeping
I
and,
just
and
think
building
once
affordable
Newton is
housing.
redeveloped,
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. I'm not.
yeah, it's the wind. I'm saying for future development, we're gonna get all this industrial development. You gotta think about how many and what kind of community is moving in. Fill those jobs.
No, thank you for that feedback. Yeah, it's a little hard to hear you, but I think we heard just thinking about who's going to fill those jobs and where they're coming from. Are they able to live in the neighborhood? No, thank you for that. I want to kind of touch base because I know we're kind of coming to the end of our meeting here with a couple other folks on here. Bill, you commented that you like the community center at the bridge. Did you want to kind of elaborate on that or because I think the direction was to move away, right? In the revised plan was to move away from the community center. So, but you indicated a plus. So could you clarify what you meant by that? That do you feel like we'd be missing the community center if we take this new approach, or do you mind speaking to that a little more?
I think it's important that the community, the size of the community center at the bridge is relatively small. But I think many of the people that I've talked to over the last 5 years in the Sunnyside area that have been coming to PCD meetings have wanted some kind of a main street, a small main street feel to that area. And we've been working with a lot of the developers that are building there to make sure there's activation on the ground floor. So I can't speak, I'm not very knowledgeable about the code speak of the difference between innovation flex, value manufacturing, community centers. But my impression is that means that we'll be looking for continued retail activation at the street level.
Janie, is that correct with the versions of still maybe have street level activation in that area?
Yes.
Yeah, the yellow identified areas where we would want to require it. We could maybe look at other. We do also, I forgot to mention, yes, Bill, we've talked about Jason Street being kind of that, there's that idea around that becoming this kind of lower scale industrial mix, but also having some, newer uses or adaptive reuse of buildings that could activate that street. And this area specifically will be in the plan as a focus area. It'll have more detailed recommendations and we'll get into more detail than other parts of the plan in terms of land use and things like that. So we will identify that. I forgot to mention it, but Jason Street is kind of this idea of this meandering sort of funky main street. But we have to be realistic about where we can require ground floor. That's a long street, for example, that's almost 8 typical blocks, which is, that. So we just, I want to make sure that we're thinking realistically as well.
And
But
I
as
did
a-
want.
At a minimum level, I think you've identified it correctly. I think the amount of yellow that is there now gives us a good space.
And I did want to just, before we kind of end the meeting to, highlight a couple of the bullets on this slide to just kind of point your attention to about this idea of allowing this area to transition into a mixed use place when a catalyst project occurs like the bridge. Is that something, everyone think is generally a good idea? And the second question is, in the innovation flex area, if we're really focusing on job retention for, trying to retain at least 1,000 jobs, if we were to think about limiting housing in this, lighter purple area. Is that a good idea to consider or not a good idea to consider? Just wanted to kind of ask that to the committee as well, since we're trying to accommodate housing on Quig, but also a little bit of jobs in the Innovation Flex area.
Trifty, I see your hand up. And just as a reminder, our conversation is going to be with steering committee members, but we will have time here at the end in just a bit to answer questions from the public.
Yeah, hi. Jamie, you said, you spoke with some of the businesses over there where the bridge is going to be impacting them. And they said, once the bridge comes, their business isn't viable. So I guess, what's the plan for that? So if the industrial is not viable, then we are doing what over there in the flex space? Like, just if you can just give me an example of, what's going to leave, and then in its place, what are we going to encourage with the bridge coming in there? What is viable with the bridge coming in there?
With the bridge coming in, we do think it's more viable for mixed use. And so the rezoning decisions would be based on that catalyst. So if and when the 47th Avenue Bridge becomes, is planned to be constructed, that then the city might allow rezonings that are a mix of uses to occur in this area. So it still could transition into this, mixed use place. We think it should prioritize, like as Sung was saying, should we restrict residential and as a way to make sure that jobs come in back into the area. So we just, it's a policy that's sort of dependent on the assurance that one of those things is going to happen. And if the 47th Avenue Bridge becomes a reality in the next 5 years, then the city might address rezonings. For example, the roofing company that sits right there, for example, we've talked to him, and if they decide it's not the location for them anymore and they want to sell or rezone, at that point, it might be appropriate to allow higher density mixed use. But until then, the Innovation Flex, anything in that category would be more appropriate.
I have lots of questions, but I'll wait till community input time. Thank you.
So we do have 10 minutes left, and we did reserve a little bit of time for general public questions and comments. So if it's okay, if we're able to move into that. If you are from the public, if you don't mind actually just writing your question or comment in the chat or wanting to speak, feel free to raise your hand. I know there are a couple people that were trying to speak up.
I saw Joan has had her hand up for a minute.
Oh, okay.
Joan Engler.
Hi there. First of all, thank you. I thought this was a very interesting meeting and I've learned quite a bit. Two quick questions. In that area, now that there would be more density with more people living there as well as industry, how would you mitigate the air and noise pollution since there's going to be two major interstates right there bordering it? And then the other question I have is the infrastructure for the police and fire in that more density area. Would there be plans for new stations and that type of thing? Thank you.
So in terms of the air quality, it's a good point. It's a current problem and has been identified. And so in the quality of life chapter, we do address how to deal with air quality. So things like adding tree canopy to this area, adding landscape buffers, getting people like the transportation demand management that we talked about, being more aggressive and getting people out of their cars to address at least that pollution in the neighborhoods. So we are looking at that. I can't name the specific recommendations off the top of my head, but that will be, just so you know, in the quality of life section. There happens to be a police headquarters in this area, and that was a mistake on the map. It should be outlined in red because it is public land. But right here along 46 is a police headquarters. But thanks for your comment about also addressing, access for fire and other emergency needs.
Great. Looks like we don't have other hands raised or questions, but I'll give it maybe 2 to 3 more seconds. Okay, feel free, Grace, to go to the next step slides and I can close this out. I think there is a next step slide, right?
Yeah, that's me. Hang on.
Great. Thank you. So again, just the same routine of offering up a 3-week review period to provide comments by March 21st. Yeah, and meanwhile, if you have any questions or would like to chat about any of this, feel free to reach out. Councilwoman Sandoval also expressed her willingness to kind of offer up her time for the group. So please do, take advantage of all the resources that are available to you, including the hard copies that are available upon request. So the next meeting again in March will, we talked a lot about engagement a few months ago. So we'll circle back on the community engagement strategy. I did want to note that it is DPS spring break that week. So if that raises issues with anyone, you actually just let me know now, because the only other day that we can potentially reschedule is that previous Tuesday. And I know a lot of people have committees and such, but just wanted to kind of flag that to see if this actually creates issues in terms of scheduling. Noel is going to be out of town. Okay, anybody else? You can just also feel free to email me if you need to kind of think about that in the next couple of days. So we'll tentatively plan on keeping it the same day if it doesn't create a huge issue for everyone, because I know that previous Tuesday there are a lot of, again, like PCD and RNO meetings that week. So in April, we'll cover housing and land use, which will be really, by then we'll have reviewed a bulk of this section. And then early May, we were hoping to get together in person. We've been working all hard on this document together. So to be able to review everything in full form and workshop in person, but also, just have a little bit of time to celebrate. And then we're planning to be back out into the community later in June. So those are kind of next steps, and I think that's it. Any other, yeah. So thank you everyone for joining us here today, and now I get to see everyone's faces after the screen isn't shared. So thank you guys.
Bye, everybody.